morning. My name is George Freeman, 1450 Bowman Road. I'm president of the Community Action Group for Encouragement organization called CAGE for short. Our main mission is to improve the quality of life in the Gullah Geechee communities east of the Cooper, mainly in the Mount Pleasant area. I was born in Mount Pleasant, and I'll tell you my age because it's going to have an effect what I'm talking about. I'm 74 years old. When I was born in Mount Pleasant, the population in Mount Pleasant was somewhere maybe between 10 and 15,000. Today, it is somewhere around 100,000. The community that I grew up in still exists today. There are about 12, I think maybe 10 to 12 of them in the Mount Pleasant area. Those of us in those communities, we do not bike or run like the number of people that have moved to Mount Pleasant, which make up about almost 100,000 people now. If there's a vote on any issue, they will win at all times because our community have not grown like the population of Mount Pleasant. I'll digress again. When I was a kid, the town of Mount Pleasant ended at Coleman Boulevard. Today, it goes all the way out to where Wando High School is. So you can imagine the number of people that have moved here. And those people who have moved here, they have different needs or wants from those who have lived there as long as I have. Now, we have no problem with what they want, what they need, but we would like things to be fair. Right now, there's a thing called the Mount Pleasant Way that the town of Mount Pleasant is asking for money for. We have no problem with them asking for money, but we do not want them to put another lane on Rifle Range Road, because that's what this 10 or 12-foot road multi-pass thing is, another lane on Rifle Range Road. We already have a problem with increased traffic for vehicles, but now you want to increase it with motorcycles, golf carts, and whatever else that people will use that 10 lane for. I mean that 10-foot wide lane for. I handed out a, I don't know, they have it. I handed out a sheet to you with a red line showing another route that can be taken that runs parallel with Rifle Range Road. The only community it affects is one of the newer communities that already has multipath built into it. I've looked at one of the requests that was made, and I see there is a request to have part of that road, which is called Hungry Neck, be part of this Mount Pleasant Way. We feel it should be the entire thing, not just part of it. Because if you take the route that we have on there, you will go down, you'll be able to come from the old village and ride all the way to Oakland Plantation without getting onto Rifle Range Road. And that plan, Rifle Range Road is the spine. We feel that Hungry Neck should be the spine and not Rifle Range Road. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Collie from the Kiowa Conservancy. Originally, I thought I was coming up here today to present our new application to y'all, but I was corrected by Eric. That's not until next month, so you will see that soon too. But I just wanted to take a minute since we're here anyway to thank y'all for your past approvals on our projects. Everything's been moving along swimmingly, and we've got another exciting project that will be before y'all soon. So I just want y'all to know that we're very appreciative, and without the Greenbelt program, which is a unique program as y'all know, a lot of our conservation work wouldn't be possible. So just very thankful for that, and thank y'all.
All right, that's great, thank you. Can we get a motion for approval of meeting notes from October 11th?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Now on to old business. Eric?
Thank you. Can everybody see the screen all right, or do we need to dim the lights up front again? Good?
Okay.
Okay. All right, since you last met in October, council did take action on several items that you all recommended to them, so just wanted to go ahead and run through those. Just very quickly, they approved all the projects you recommended for approval last cycle as recommended, a few of those with conditions. The Jefferson Tract Grant Agreement amendment for the town of Allendale was approved, and that's the one that will allow other entities to work with them to manage the park and the project without any financial repercussions. And then the Tract D conversion, that was City of North Charleston taking that one parcel out of the Greenbelt program and paying the appraised value back in. All of that was approved, and we've moved forward with executing the legal documents that we needed to do to complete those. Any questions on any of that? If not, I'll move on. Okay. So just as a reminder, about a year ago, as part of our 5-year comprehensive Greenbelt plan review, we had discussed a draft forward spending policy, and it did not make it into the recommendations to council. What you all decided was to essentially table it for a year and kind of look at the impact that it would have had on projects during that year if it had been implemented. Currently, we don't have any written policy for forward spending. So if there's total cash for the whole program on hand and it's under that allocation's projected lifetime balance, then you have considered those for forward spending, essentially borrowing from other allocations, borrowing the cash while it's available. So I'll just run through this draft forward spending policy very briefly. You were all sent it out in advance, and that again was developed over a year ago. Applicants. So first of all, there's 2 tracks, one for commitments of future allocations, and then one that is more of that true borrowing from other allocations. And the very first line up there basically says that applicants are intended to use the funding that's available, but if it's very unique circumstances, they could justify forward spending under one of those 2 options. The first one being commitment of future allocation. So applicants can be awarded funding in excess of their current available allocation under the conditions. One, that they grade at least good or higher on their appropriate project scale. As a reminder, those ratings are fair. What were our ratings again? Fair, good, excellent. There's one more. There's a fourth that's even lower. Let me pull those up. Just show you an example here. There we go. So for feet, there's poor. So that's the breakdown. So for a project to qualify to commit their future allocations, it has to be scored at least in that good range. And as a reminder, there are different scales for the different types of projects: corridors, minor improvements, and fee simple. All right, and then the applicant under this scenario would secure alternative funding, whether that be a bridge loan or using their own funds to cover that difference. But essentially, they'd be awarded upfront an amount in excess of what's available, and then they would commit future years' allocations until they're fully paid out for the amount that they were awarded. One key aspect of this is that new project applications won't be accepted until all of those outstanding annual payments have been completed. And then the other, so that's like our Fort Pemberton model for those of you that were around during that time. City of Charleston committed several years of future funding, and they got a payment every year as those revenues came in. The one thing that we didn't have was that number 4 item where they were able to actually put in other applications and be awarded, even though they didn't have those available funds. Then the other option, and this would be most recently similar to the B-Field project that was approved last cycle. Under exceptional circumstances, applicants can be awarded funding from their projected lifetime allocation balance under certain conditions. These need to score in that excellent range of the scales we showed you earlier. Forward spending requests would be capped at 10% of the projected lifetime allocation balance for that allocation. The applicant demonstrates proof that they have tried to fund it on their own first, and through that first track that we just talked about. And the requested forward spending would not adversely impact other projects for that cycle. And then there's some additional protections on the rural allocation. essentially saying that you borrow first from other urban funds and that no borrowing from rural would happen if the balance were under $6 million in the rural allocation. And also, similar to that item in the previous track, no project applications would be accepted until the balance is back on the positive side. Municipalities, as they can do now, could designate their own funds for other projects. And then a recommendation for forward spending would require a supermajority vote of the GAB. And as always, County Council has to approve all project awards. So just for a summary slide of the key points, bridge funding is encouraged over the actual borrowing from other allocations. There's a 10% cap on the projected lifetime balance with an excellent score for the borrowing option. Can't adversely impact other projects during that cycle. There's a rural floor of $6 million. There's no new awards with a negative balance or until you've been repaid for all future funding commitments. And the 2/3 supermajority for forward spending. And again, as a reminder, we tabled this for 1 year and we're now looking at that impact. So for the 2 full cycles we've had since last February, FY23 winter and FY24 summer, we had 14 projects that were approved. 1 project was awarded funding requiring forward spending, and that was B Field in the urban unincorporated allocation. The score was 63, which rated as fair, and this project would not have been funded had we been under that draft policy for a couple of reasons. One, the allocation was already negative, and even if it were not negative, it did not score in the excellent range, allowing it to borrow from other allocations. And then just some considerations, some notes that popped out at me that I wanted to share with you as you consider this potential policy, is that it really will not fit urban unincorporated, small landowner, or the rural applications because you've got multiple applicants that can apply for those funds. So at least with the urban municipal allocations, one entity is committing its future funds. So I would not be comfortable with one entity committed to forward spending and preventing all others that could apply for those funds, different nonprofit organizations or those in the rural area, being locked out until that entity was repaid. Something else that jumped out is that there's a clear difference in 10% of the biggest 3 municipalities and then all of the rest. For instance, Charleston, which is our largest, 10% of their current total projected lifetime balance would be nearly $3 million, while James Island, which is the 4th largest municipal allocation, 10% of their 3.2 million total projected lifetime balance is only $320,000. And then just a reminder that those project scores are just one tool that you all use when you're analyzing the value of a project. As you know, they don't all fit perfectly into that scoring rubric, and there's sometimes other considerations that you take into account. So I think that's the end of my notes on everything, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on the forward spending.
Eric, it seems like based on your slides that we shouldn't take any action on this. It seems like it's kind of working, and if we kept the guidelines in mind as we talk about these projects, that might be the best we can do on this, because we don't want to limit like a James Island, correct? Or a, I don't know, based on this slide you have up, it seems like it imposes too many restrictions on the smaller players.
That is, as it's written now, that is a concern that I have.
Yeah.
If you want, we could certainly make changes to that draft forward spending policy if it's something that you would like staff to work on. Hopefully this discussion can provide some direction if that's the case.
Mr. Jones, do you have a question?
No, I just say that I agree with you. I look at it all. I can't improve it. I can't criticize it. Probably if we get a project and come along and look at it, maybe we just do an ad hoc consideration as we've done in the past.
So maybe this would be a test and not official policy, just another way to look at a project that may be requesting forward
Maybe
spending.
if you could have very broad parameters, but I think we've got those anyhow, haven't we?
Any other questions or thoughts?
No, just thought. I mean, I agree too. I think, you know, we've looked at it for this past year, and there was only one instance where, and I know we're going to talk about that next, because I do think we need to probably talk about small landowner and the urban unincorporated funding. But it seems to have worked for this past year. I think if I remember right too, we've got about 18 years left on this current program. I would imagine eventually we'll get to the point that we're, you know, it's just not going to be doable to afford spend, because the funds just aren't going to still to continue to come in. But for now, it doesn't seem like it would be that much of a concern, as long as we kind of take into consideration some parameters.
Sounds right. I would motion that we move on. Does that need to be a motion, or can we just simply move on?
And unless there's any other questions or comments from the commissioner, as the chair, you can move on to the next agenda item.
Great, okay. Unless anybody else has any more questions, we're moving on to the next agenda item. Okay. Next, small landowner or urban unincorporated allocations.
Yeah, I was going to go ahead and take these two together because they are somewhat related, as you'll see, if that's all right, and then open up the floor for discussion. So the small landowner program was established in 2010 with $1.2 million coming from the rural allocation. There were two primary reasons that the small landowner program was developed. One, it was to provide assistance to smaller landowners that may have land that they would prefer to put under protection or sell for a public park or public green space, putting them in touch with what is now the Low Country Land Trust, who can help them learn about their options for funding through us and potentially other organizations, but to also help these smaller community organizations, often in our settlement communities, have a kind of another allocation that they can draw from for those projects. Eligible projects are less than 30 acres. They can be either in that rural or urban area. Mentioned the Low Country Land Trust assistance. So the full explanation of that is they will help the applicant get through the whole application process. A lot of these smaller community organizations are not familiar with a lot of the requirements in our grant application process and our due diligence. And then once they've been awarded funding and they take ownership of the property, Low Country Land Trust continues to work with them to try and get funds and resources for development, and then eventually they transfer that property over to the community organization with additional deed restrictions or maybe a conservation easement, which is another layer on top of the grant agreement. So there have been 4 projects funded so far: Phillips Community Park, Magnolia Community Garden, Cage Park, and most recently the Rutledge Tomb Site, and that leaves just a balance of just over $55,000. I think as we continue to see in council meetings, we hear more and more about development pressures in a lot of these settlement communities and urban unincorporated areas. I think we're going to get more and more requests for funding for these types of projects. And I did mention urban unincorporated because a lot of these projects have been funded through that allocation in the past. As you know, it's currently in the negative, almost 4.8 million. We estimate around 8 years until that balance would be back on the positive side. And of course, that all depends on collections. So that's just a projection for now. Of the lifetime balance, there's over 2.6 million remaining. And there's a list of all the urban unincorporated funded projects, and I've got them slightly color-coded there. The ones in orange, which are 10 projects: Snowden, 3 in the Phillips community, Presley Track, 4 Mile, Cage, 10 Mile Heritage Farm, and Beefield. Those are all smaller community organization type projects that would have qualified for small landowner program as well. The one big outlier is Boone Hall. That was the big conservation easement. And then the last 3 in blue, Church Creek, Forest Lakes, and Dogwood Park. Those are all West Ashley, St. Andrews Public Service District, and St. Andrews Parks and Playgrounds. So those are your primary users of the urban unincorporated funds. And I think with a few tweaks to the small landowner program procedures, that even the Church Creek, Forest Lakes, and Dogwood Park type projects would qualify for small landowner program funding going forward. So those are, that's the high level view of small landowner and urban unincorporated. Because all of those, most of those urban unincorporated projects could be funded from small landowner, and because the small landowner program can fund projects in the urban and rural area, that would be, staff recommendation would be to look closer at recapitalizing small landowner as opposed to urban unincorporated at this time. And I think there's maybe, you may be looking at a short-term and potentially a longer-term solution. You could always make a recommendation now to reallocate funds from either urban and or rural to the small landowner program. And as you know, and you'll hear more about in just a little bit, council intends to put a third half-penny sales tax referendum out this November. And, you know, if approved, I think that's more of the long-term fix, because they're going, as has been done in the past, you all make a recommendation on how those funds would be divided out to different allocations. So you could consider small landowner as a separate allocation, just like you do rural and urban, should the third half-penny sales tax be successful.
Does low country, excuse me, Low Country Land Trust, do they not do less than 30 acres? Why wouldn't, if they came to any one of those right there, go to them, does their business model not, does it say, look, you're just too small?
No, the 30 acres, I believe this was put in place back in 2010, and it was, I think it was to address a perception that only large landowners could benefit from this program. So the 30 acres, I don't know exactly why we got to that exact cutoff, but at that time, that's what was determined would be considered a smaller landowner. So these funds, they wanted separate funds for the smaller projects and the smaller communities.
It seems like a really important category, but is it staff's opinion that it would be easier to bring about a new funding mechanism in November, or do you think we should try to get something in place now?
So we don't know if November, first of all, we don't know for sure it's going to be on the ballot yet. We don't know if it's going to be successful. You all can make a recommendation at any time. I can tell you we don't have a project that's going to be coming to you in a couple of months for the winter cycle requesting these funds. And you could always address it if you did receive a project that was requesting in excess of what's available. You could also make a recommendation at that time to county council to fund it through a different allocation.
Mr. Jones, you got a question?
Yes. In this program, what was the Boone Hall request and what was granted?
What was the amount?
7 mil. About that.
I'm not
give or
sure.
take.
You recall that, David? About
But it was several involved, a total of 7.
that's right. So urban unincorporated was less than that. I believe urban unincorporated was around 3 million, and then another 2 million, I believe, came from the town.
The
of
point
Mount
of my
Pleasant.
question
years
is
ago.
that the funding for that really exaggerated the problem. Take that out, and we don't have the problem that it seems to be at the moment. I'm not opposed to increasing it. Maybe that's the right thing. But I'm just thinking how likely are we to get more Boone Halls? I would say not very.
Yeah, Boone Hall and Church Creek probably make up at least half of the funds that have been spent on urban unincorporated to date.
So what would you suggest?
One other
then?
question.
Yes.
So in the projects that you have coming in for the cycle, do any of those fall into either of these two categories?
No, sir.
So, right, and when is have the application cycle closed out?
Yes, it
Submission
has.
done? All right, so
Yep,
if we don't do something right now, it's not going to affect this current cycle.
that's correct.
Guys, why don't we wait until, I don't know, next cycle at least, and maybe even November? What do y'all think about that?
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Does the small landowner program, I was trying to look for future lifetime allocation, does that replenish?
It does not. That was a one-time funding from the rural
So it's only
allocation.
55, that's it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, once that's gone, it will not be there. It will not be replenished unless county council votes to move money from another allocation. And I believe that takes a supermajority of county council, according to our ordinance, to change the allocation percentages.
Is everybody good with moving on to the next agenda item and just letting this sit until it becomes an issue?
Well, can we, like, this came up last time, could we have a project come up and then vote to move this, to do this allocation along with that project? We didn't do that last time.
We can, though.
We can. Okay, if we can do it, then yeah, there's no reason to do it.
Yeah, you would just need, if you did decide to recommend forward spending on the small landowner program, you would also need a recommendation to council to accompany that, to recommend where those funds should come from.
Just move into the small landowner and then back over, okay?
Does it in any way inhibit small landowners from applying if they don't see funds available?
It does not. So a small landowner can still be funded through other allocations. It's just that larger allocations can't draw, larger acreages can't draw from the small landowner funding.
But if a small project's out there considering all this, the key is reaching out to you or somebody on staff so that
Right.
they are alerted that they can get funded, even if it appears there's nothing to fund them.
Yeah, we would tell them, and we have done this just most recently for the B Field project, let them know that urban unincorporated is forward spent. You can still apply, but just know that, it may be an uphill battle for further forward spending. And if there's a small landowner program, we would let them know the amount that's available and that, just what I just told you, that they can apply for funding, but it would have to be recommended by you all to change the allocations to fund it through small landowner. So we would just want to be upfront with them, let them know that there's a little bigger hill to climb because the money's not currently there, but it could be there if council makes that decision.
Yes, question, Mr. Jones.
Going back, or looking at this and going back, somebody applying and not knowing whether they're going to be successful, should we just in principle say if we go into forward funding, then we need to have a premier type project, and maybe it should be in the excellent or good as a generalization? You don't want people wasting their time if it's only going to be fair. I'm just thinking, in retrospect, maybe there should be some broad principle, as it has to be a quality project for us to even consider.
For any forward spending.
Can you restate that? One of you? We didn't quite hear it down here.
Sorry. Just regarding this and what we were looking before, if we don't have the funding in place and somebody makes an effort to put a project together, they shouldn't be encouraged unless the project has merit in our view. So I'm suggesting, okay, maybe we shouldn't put a framework that has all the sort of restrictions and whatever, but just in principle, that if we are going to consider a forward project, it has to be ranked in good or excellent rather than fair or whatever, just as perhaps a restraint or some sort of restriction or some sort of indication to an applicant.
It seems like that would come up naturally in the course of the application process.
And the official score is the subcommittee score, which we typically don't receive until a day or two before your subcommittee meeting. So they've already submitted their application at that point in time.
And the staff's already graded it as well
We,
prior to that.
we give them as much feedback as we can, you know, where we think it will rank, or areas where they may not score high. But timing wise, that would, you know, they're gonna have to submit before they know what the score would be.
Let's wait until we have an issue.
I agree.
Is that all right? Okay, moving on. Next agenda item. Greenbelt program update.
Yep, I'll just run through the update. Since the last time you've received this information was last October. Current funds available for the remainder of FY '24, which goes through the end of June, is $22.7 million. You can see the breakdown there between rural and urban. This is the current available annual allocations. Urban unincorporated is forward spent considerably, and the town of Folly Beach also falls into that category. But even those two allocations have positive projected lifetime total urban allocations.
Can you go back to that previous slide? No, the next back one. All right.
We continue to work towards our 6 main goals of rural lands, national forests, wetlands, urban lands, corridors, and county parks. We've been taking a little bigger bite out of the corridors finally, thanks to the town. National forest, wetland, and county parks, those goals are all exceeded. Since October, we have closed 5 projects: Lake Margaret, Woodmere, Beefield, Bradham Tract, and the North Bridge properties, and we still have 13 projects currently pending closing. I did hear some good news on Phillips Community Park. I know you've asked about that one before, Vice Chair Scarden. They had a title issue, and they have finally contacted all family members, or all heirs to that property, and things are moving forward now. I think with the land trust taking that over, it's finally moving forward.
Do you know what's going on with the ones on Betsy Carrison?
We have been talking with Collie just over the last few days. They've been sending in all of their due diligence items. 2 and 3 were reimbursements, so those have closed, and we're getting very close to reimbursing them for their closings. I would expect within the next few weeks. Yeah. And then the phase 1, there was a title issue on that one that just started moving again recently, so that one should be coming soon as well. Did you want to add anything, Colin?
Yes.
You can come on up to the mic so we can get you.
For Nature Trail Phase 1, there was an heirs property issue at title. We know that the landowner had previously had a court date with the judge to clear that title many months back, and the judge had ruled that that wasn't sufficient, what they came up to the judge with, but they have a new date set for March the 8th to get clean title. And so if all goes well with him being able to gain that clean title on that date, then we've asked for a late March closing. So we would be able to give us enough time to coordinate with Eric, get all the funds in at one time to close. And then, 2 and 3 grant agreements are in our attorney's hands to be able to get that filled out by the end of this month or March. So thank you.
And Eric, can you kind of give us a feel for the timing for the rest of them? I mean, is it within 6 months? Is it unknown?
I think each one's kind of unique. The Mount Pleasant Way projects, there's 6 of those.
Yep.
And as you know, a mile long of
Right.
Mount Pleasant Way, you're going to have multiple right-of-way closings. So we haven't gotten through the first one of those yet, and that'll provide a model for how we'll do these going forward. Station 26.5 boardwalk. From what I recall, that was something they were going to jump on right away, but we have not gotten an update from them recently. The Rutledge Tomb site had an issue with the subdivision of that smaller parcel that they're working through with planning and zoning right now. Ravenswood, that was a large conservation easement that is having issues with the various members of the trust that own the property, and not sure if or when that one will go forward.
The boardwalk, they had a little setback with that storm that came through. Talked to Andy, been passing Andy Banky. Mm-hmm. He said they're not getting on it, but that storm put them back a little bit.
Okay. And we're happy, we do keep up. We have the new report that we keep up with, the public access and improvements. So we update as we get information that comes in, so we can send that out quarterly or however often you like.
Did you say there were 16 pending closings?
13.
13.
Just for reference, I was updating the slide from our last meeting, and at that time we had 5 that had recently closed and 12 that were pending. So we kind of, from what I can tell, this is the normal balance. Any other questions on closings? So our current cycle did close back on January 26th. Those projects will be presented to the subcommittee right here on March 13th at 9 a.m. And then you all will consider those on April 10th. Next application cycle, FY25 summer, will open on June 3rd and close on July 26th. And those projects go before county council typically in November. I'll run through our program stats briefly. I'm not going to read everything, but if you have any questions, please just let me know. 207 total projects now that have been approved. Protecting over 25,000 acres. Almost 144 million in funds awarded. At an average cost per acre of $5,564. And generating a whopping match of 143% or $206.1 million. And 44% of all acreage and 87% of all funding is tied to either current or planned future public access, including the Charleston County Parks and Rec Commission lands that were bought as part of the first sales tax. Our minority lands funding is at $58.9 million, 3,890 acres. If there's no questions on those stats, I'll move on to an update on that potential third half-cent transportation sales tax referendum.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, go ahead.
I was looking at your goals, and we've exceeded 100% in several areas. Has the staff been thinking about, or, I don't know, do we need to relook at our goals to increase them if we're going to continue the program, or do we say, hey, look, it looks like we made it and we've got money to spare?
We're happy to take a look at that. I would think, typically that will be done during one of those 5-year reviews.
Yeah.
I know the last one was kind of the intermediate review. every 10 years, we do more of a total inventory on all lands in the county and update all of our stats and all that. We could work with you all to redefine goals at that point, if that makes sense. Or
Are these the same
potentially-
original goals from the original?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And so we've had a new allotment, but we never did anything with the goals, so.
I don't think there were any changes to the goals from the original comprehensive Greenbelt plan. And that was based on, originally those goals were set to ensure that at least 30% of all lands in the county were protected, and then broken down in between those different components.
Okay.
So you can see overall, we have exceeded with that 111% there. So maybe we should take a look at those again.
Well, it seems to me if you're going to go out and ask folks to do another vote, to do a third tranche, right? Third allotment. It's hard to go and say, well, we've accomplished our goals, but we want you to pay more money. It seems like we ought to have new goals. I mean, what do we really want them to, or what does council really want us to do? Or do we not want to get in there? I don't know. Okay.
I don't know if we're gonna be able to answer that today, but it's something
No,
to
I
think
don't.
about
I
for
just don't
sure.
know if anybody else
Yeah.
has the same feeling, but when I look at that and you're trying to sell the community on a new tax, it would seem to me that it would run counter to what your talking points would say. I think it's a great program. I'm not trying to get, it just seems like it's a little out of whack trying to ask for more money when you said, well, we've accomplished all our goals, we exceeded them, but we want to do more. Then, okay, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go through that exercise with you all if you feel like that's something we want to tackle now.
Well,
it's
this
all-
is
it's all
one
in
person.
framing. You know, it's like, well, we accomplished this batch. Clearly, there's more need in this community.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
But, so it would seem to me that we would have to, and I don't know what everyone else thinks, this is just me, and I'm happy to turn the mic off, but it would just seem to me that we ought to say there is a need, like you're saying, and we ought to try to quantify what we want to do. I mean, the corridors, yeah, definitely, we need to improve those and keep going after those. Since I've been here, other than the ones in Mount Pleasant, I'm not sure how many corridors projects have we had, and are there any out there, that we see on the horizon. But again, I'm all into, protecting all as much as we can. But it just seems to me to run counter to what we're trying to ask the public for.
We can certainly add that to the April meeting agenda and do some work leading up to then.
But I would ask everybody else if they have an opinion on it. If they don't think it's worthwhile exercise, then I'm more than happy to step back.
Seems totally worthwhile. Everybody agree? Rita?
I definitely agree with that. We need to conserve or more of the heirs property in the rural areas. We've got too many houses, too many cars. They need to be green space. I agree with you, Steve. We need to stop the growth.
Yeah, I agree. Mr. Jones?
Well, I agree. I think it's sort of a political decision. Frankly, I don't think it's going to make any difference to the applications. We will still take the applications for all of these categories, whatever the goal might be. But if we're enthusiastic about Greenbelts and we want to get funds to continue the program, I think it makes sense. I mean, if somebody were opposed to the Greenbelt, what's obvious? Hey, your goal was X the number of forests and wetlands and you've achieved it. What the hell you want more money for? So I think we need to move the goals just to make it expedient politically.
Well, Eric, could we ask you to just consider that between now and April and
Sure.
with the idea of sort of, it's almost like a PR thing, building on success, like the thing has been enormously successful, and how do we kind of redefine some of these, in y'all's opinion, to make it to put new milestones.
So I'll say we're happy to do what you direct us to do, but we would not be associated whatsoever with any campaigning for the referendum or anything that could be construed as that. Just, we have to be very careful about that. So if you direct us for information on the topic on how you would like to set those goals, whether that's changing some of the components or adding new components, we're happy to facilitate that. But as far as messaging and packaging, staff will not be able to be involved in that.
Yes, Fran.
Thanks. I have a question that I don't, as much as I value what we do and think we can do more, I'm not sure that it's our responsibility to move the goalposts. I think it's probably up to county council. And then we implement it. I don't think it's up to us to say, well, hey, we want more work. Give us more money. I think it's, we implement county council, their goals.
Fair point. Mr. Jones.
Well, as I've been on the Greenbelt Advisory Board since its inception, we made the recommendation as to what the goals were. Yes, they have the final say, but we are the advisor. They're going to say to us, well, what goal are you wanting? Is it a political decision? It was a political decision perhaps 15 years or so ago, but it's the same situation now as what it is then. I think we have every right, an expectation to change the goal if we think it's necessary. So I certainly feel we should go ahead regardless to look at the goals.
So I would just ask if you have any different goals or ideas about how they may be changed, that you would reach out to staff so that we can,
Francis.
we can work on that.
Should we make a motion for that, or just ask them to do that, or I could make a motion?
Sure, sure, if you have it in mind.
I make a motion for staff to review these goals and make some recommendations for us to consider, making them, in
Incorporating
line.
them.
What's that?
Incorporating them.
Incorporating them. And improving, making them larger.
Do we have a second? And did you hear that?
I just move that we have the staff to review these goals and make a recommendation for us on how to make them, I guess, a little larger, or, because we've already met these goals. So do we have, some new acreages to consider that would be realistic for us? And then we could review it and then pass it on to council to consider.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion?
Question,
Yes.
actually for legal. I hear what Eric's saying about the concerns, with staff and input and something that's going to a referendum. What is your opinion about what's being requested? Is that keeping staff in an appropriate spot?
And if the request is simply to look at what the county's goals for Greenbelt conservation is, that's fine. But anything regarding the sales tax, advocating for the sales tax or promoting it, wouldn't be out of bounds for staff to do.
Thank you.
And I'm not asking you to get in the PR business. I'm just trying to, for our own sake here, especially at the subcommittee level, should we start, if they come in for national forest and we say, well, we've already exceeded our goal there, we're not going to entertain it, or?
Maybe there's a scientific approach to the way you look at it, and it's just like the goals 15 years ago or whenever we started this pertain to this much protected land. Now we've achieved it, and kind of on a pro rata basis, we would suggest increasing the goals this much. Maybe there's like a numeric approach to this relative to where we started and where we are, so that you remove all emotion or notion of PR, any of that?
We'll dig into it and a little deeper on how exactly these were developed and then divide it out between the subcategories and report back on different scenarios for changing those goals.
And we can probably keep it very simple, but anyway, Mr. Jones.
Just from, it's obvious. To me, the simplest thing would be, hell, in the last 5 years, there's been a massive increase in the number of people into South Carolina. The pressure for population has increased a hell of a lot more than what it was 15, 16 years or so ago. We need to protect more land. I think that's basic.
And maybe there's a numeric approach to that too.
Yeah, we'll come back with several options on how you guys can consider making a recommendation to adjust these goals and go from there.
Sounds good.
I think we need to look a little deeper into exactly how these were developed.
You want to say that out loud? Okay.
Do we need to vote on it?
We do need to vote. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you guys for doing that. Next item of business. Next meeting. Oh, will you put the dates?
Sorry, I haven't done the sales tax yet. I think we're
Sorry.
about to start that and jump back. So as I think you all know, we have been holding some public meetings for a potential third half-cent transportation sales tax referendum, of which Greenbelt would receive 8% or $432 million if successful to continue our programs. Council did pass a resolution 2402, essentially saying that they intend to work towards putting this on the ballot in November, but they still would have to do 3 ordinance readings prior to August 13th to place that on the ballot, which would be on November 5th, 2024. We have one final public meeting if you'd like to come out and learn about not just Greenbelt, but roads and CARTA, mass transit as well. That'll be on the 26th from 5 to 7 at North Charleston City Hall. And then there is a website, and comments will be taken there up until March 6th. And thought I'd open the website just briefly here. So third transportation sales tax, if you go under Greenbelt, you'll see the first 4 items underneath that subheading. Oh, you can't see that, can you? Oops. Give me just a second. There we go. All right, so Greenbelt is up at the top. These first 4 are the actual poster boards that we have up when folks come through, where they can learn about projects that were funded through the first and second half penny. Here's an example of one of those. They're rather large, but this shows the whole county with every Greenbelt funded parcel on it. As well as some major stats down there and what exactly Greenbelt does. The other 3 posters are zoomed in versions of each part of the county, central, northern, and southern, with several sample projects for that region that show all the different types of landscapes and properties that Greenbelt protects. And that's all I have for the third potential referendum, and happy to answer any questions about that if you have them.
Any questions on this? Oh, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep. So we've got subcommittee meeting coming up on March 13th and full GAB to consider all of those recommendations from the subcommittee on April 10th. And we'll also bring you back some information on goal setting.
Sounds good.
What was the date of that last meeting for the sales tax referendum meeting at City Hall in North Charleston? 226.
Yeah.
5 to 7, okay.
That's a Monday.
That'd probably be a good thing to attend.
Turnout's been around 40 or 50 at the lower attended meetings and slightly over 100 for the more heavily attended ones.
What's the feedback so far?
Most everybody loves Greenbelt.
And
I man the Greenbelt table, so I do a lot of pointing when people ask about roads to a different part of the room.
got it.
Okay. All right, well, that seems good. We got the next meeting lined up, so unless there's any additional business, any questions, any final thoughts? Barbara?
I'm wondering about this alternate route for the Mount Pleasant Way project instead of along Rifle Range Road. Is that, does that have any legs?
It's not really on our agenda at the moment, but I suppose that would be a question for Mount P, really.
We've got an application forthcoming on the next agenda for Rifle Range Road.
Okay, so in other words, we haven't settled on the exact route for that particular part of the way.
We have a map for the whole entire town, and the next segment that we are pursuing is on Rifle Range Road.
So that would be the time to talk about this as well.
Okay.
And-
All right.
And/or you could request to have it on the agenda in April.
Okay.
I mean, it's
How
going, it's
about
going to
that?
be on the, it's going to be, on some level, be on the agenda regardless because of the rifle range application. Is that fair to say? Like, it's going to come up.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
What do you?
It's your birthday?
I'll start with